So I normally say that I wanted to be a bullfighter.
Yeah.
And then when I was 14 years old, I tried it, miserably failed.
What does failing in bullfighting look like? That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, means getting run over by it wasn't a bull, it was a calf. So it was it was not a good one. But and it's a kind of an irony, because then after a few years I became a vegetarian and a vegan.
Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to Architecting.
Hi, welcome to Architecting. I'm Rebecca Wagner, here with the host, Adam Wagner. Hey, Adam, who's on the podcast today?
Yeah, hey, so today we have a guy who I think wins the award for Best Podcast Guest Voice. He has some very diverse experiences as well. He's from Colombia, but studied in Belgium and then Wisconsin. And he worked in Aspen and Chicago and Tampa, as well as completing projects in China and Rwanda. Then he moved to Denver and has become a very influential person in our urban fabric as a senior architect for RTD, as well as being on the Denver Planning Board and an AIA director. So, who am I talking about?
Is it Ignacio Correa-Ortiz?
Mm-hmm.
I saw him speak at a Christopher Kelly event. He was really great, really inspiring.
Yeah, he's a really magnetic guy. And after the break for the bonus material, we talk a little bit more about a recent burglary that happened to him, and then his thoughts on the roles that zoning, social housing, and accessory dwelling units can play within the city. So check it out. Hey, look, so modern Denver is great, right?
Yes, we love them.
Yeah. Local stories about good architecture.
And a new profile about you and architecting in the fall issue.
Yeah. Yep. But modern Denver is not just all about the magazine either. We're now coming up on the best part of the year, Denver Design Week. So from October 16th through the 24th, there are a ton of events and sessions and talks put on by Bonner in Denver.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great ones. One that I'm really looking forward to is a session with the photographer James Florio and his work with Ensemble Studio, and a new book coming out. Looks really great.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of great events, as well as a live architecting show entitled The Voyage Out, Stories from the Early Days of Colorado's Top Architecture Firms. This is going to be with Stephen Dinya, Kevin Nguyen, and Joanne and Hans from ArcDen on October 18th at 11:30 at Pear Workplace Solutions. Come and check it out.
Go to www.denverdesignweek.com to check out all the events and reserve your tickets now.
How's your Saturday?
So far, so good.
This is kind of nice. This is the first Saturday recording I've done.
Okay.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
It's good.
A little bit more relaxed, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I still get kind of like amped up and nervous for these things, and I thought maybe Saturday would help that, but nope, I still got nervous. So
don't be.
So where are you at right now?
I'm at home. I'm actually at my dining table.
Nice. Are you in Denver?
I am in Denver, yes.
Nice.
Where are you?
Yeah, Denver as well.
Okay.
Kind of north side.
Obviously, you do this because you like doing it, but this is not your main occupation, is it?
No. Yeah. So I'm an architect, and I teach at CU part time, and okay. I was at Open Studio Architecture, and just this month I started my own firm. So
wow, congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
I've done that, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, actually, this is the third time I've started my own firm. So
okay,
third time's a charm here.
I believe so. Yeah.
I keep it. For me, it's like the grass is always greener. I always get distracted by the next kind of flashy thing, and I jump to it. And But yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. So what is the name of your practice, or just under your own name?
Yeah, it's called Vessel Office of Architecture. So
Okay.
I have another partner that's in Connecticut. So we're kind of doing a remote office together.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like very 21st century.
Nice. Yeah.
You know, I'm a baby boomer, so for us, it's a little bit different. I am from the generation that started drafting with pencil and ink on Mylar and Bumwad and whatever you have. And then we transitioned through our, my last years of undergraduate or my professional degree. I went to school for architecture in Colombia. Actually, my first college experience was at a school of fine arts, actually a school of arts and crafts. It's called l'École des Arts Visuels de la Cambre in Brussels. And this school was funded by Henry van de Velde, who you may have studied in your architecture history classes, because he is the one who started the arts and crafts school in Weimar that later became the Bauhaus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When Germany entered in the First World War, they kicked out all the non-German citizens, including Van de Velde, who was Belgian, and he went to Brussels and started this school. And appointed Walter Gropius to do to remain as the director of the school, and then eventually became that. So
wait, let's step back for a second. So, well, first off, you can't get away without answering this question. Who are you?
Well, I'm a dad, a husband, an architect, an urban planner, an urban designer. And I'm just I'm also a migrant in a way. I came to the U.S. 30 years ago. So what am I? Who am I? Yes, that's a difficult question, because most times we reply to that as what am I or what am I doing, as opposed to who I am. So in that sense, I would be a philosopher. I studied philosophy as an amateur. And in that sense, I am a regenerativist, which is kind of my own philosophy of how I like to live my life, how I think that my career can be helpful to my environment and to what I do. So the theory that I have behind regenerativism is that everything that we do right now needs to help us to regenerate the environment in which we live, so that we are not taxing our ecosystems as much, or our social systems, or our economies, and so on. And so that's kind of the theory behind regenerativism.
Nice. That was a very complete answer. I like that. So how'd you get there? So, okay, you started in Colombia, right? You grew up there?
So I normally say that I wanted to be a bullfighter.
Yeah.
And then when I was 14 years old, I tried, like any kid in the U.S. wanted to be an astronaut, I guess, or at least in that age. So I love bullfighting. I love the idea of bullfighting. And when I was 14, my friend, school friend, his dad had a school for bullfighters, and I tried it, miserably failed.
What does failing in bullfighting look like? That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, it means getting run over by it wasn't a bull, it was a calf. So it was it was not a good one. But and it's a kind of an irony, because then after a few years I became a vegetarian and a vegan and so on. So it is I was looking at it from a different cultural perspective. I know bullfighting today is not is not very well seen. It's very much not understood as well. And obviously, the blood and gore is obviously something that turns a lot of people off. But there is an ancient ritual there, and there is an art, not a sport, and so on. I'm not defending it. I'm just trying to explain it, which is really difficult to explain. So last time I went to bullfight was when I was on my honeymoon back home in Colombia, and my wife, we had to walk out, and so that was the last time I was there many years ago. I've been married for 26 years. So,
but was that the thing that, growing up for me, it was every boy wanted to play in the NBA? Was that the thing in Colombia that every kid wanted to be a bullfighter, or were you kind of an anomaly in that? And what drew you to it?
No, every kid wanted to be a soccer player, but I was not good. I'm actually a referee, or I am retiring as a referee this year as a soccer referee. So that was the first thing I wanted to do. My mom is a painter and a philosophy teacher, and many other things. He's a Renaissance woman. My dad, he was a diplomat and a lawyer and a manager of insurance companies and so on. And so when I graduated high school, I did a semester of architecture in my hometown. And then I went to Belgium, where my parents were living. And I did my first year of school in fine arts. I did not have what a fine artist or a successful fine artist have to have, which is discipline. And instead of spending my time in the studio, I was doing graffiti on the streets, doing something that actually you see in Bansky nowadays. So I was ahead of my times by 40 years and so on. It wasn't just defacing things. It was trying to create some kind of art with stencils and so on. I decided to come back to Colombia and finish architecture in my hometown, Bucaramanga, at the Santo Tomas University. It's a 5-year program. You end up as a licensed architect. Well, you have to apply for the license, but you qualify to be a licensed architect as soon as you come out of the 5-year program. Wow. So I had a small practice on my own for a little bit, which was very interesting because the relationship of the architect with the general contractor, we call them in Colombia maestros, the masters. The general contractors are really masters in Colombia, and they know all the trades and so on. So we had that kind of, I had that relationship with a maestro until I got a scholarship to go to the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee to do a joint master's in architecture and urban planning. And
but why there? I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
Why Milwaukee?
You've already had one big jump of Belgium.
Yeah. Well, actually, my idea was to go to Japan. My sister had a friend who had gone to Japan, and I was enamored with the idea. So I applied for a scholarship, which I did not get. I had studied Japanese. I was getting ready. I actually did get the admission into the university through the Monbusho government, basically the entity in Japan that offers the scholarship. But the Colombian side did not give me that. Actually, I think that somebody had was better favored, whatever. So the scholarship went to somebody else. These were very competitive scholarships. While I was doing that, a professor from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Ernest Alexander, was visiting Colombia on a Fulbright scholarship. And I served as his interpreter and translator. And he asked me about my plans. I told him, and said, well, you should apply for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So I did. And one thing didn't happen, the other thing happened. They were in rapid succession. So I ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 92. Sorry, in 89. So I was there from 89 to 92, a 3-year double joint master's architecture and urban planning. My intent was to study urban design. At that time, I think the only one school of urban design in the U.S. was the Graduate School of Design, GSD, at
Harvard. Yeah.
Harvard. Thank you.
Do you think about that? The odds of that professor coming and you being a translator for him, and Indy translates to you going to this school and being in this country. And I mean, I guess you can say that with most things about how life ends up, but
life is minor things. I'm going to tell you a quick story because it's not the subject of this, but the way I met my wife, she was a DJ at KSPN in Aspen, Colorado. I called to request a song, and
and her number. Yeah.
Well, I called the radio station, and then that was the rest is history, as they say.
Okay, so you're in Wisconsin, and you're studying urban design, and I mean, doesn't Columbia have a pretty? I mean, that architectural program was pretty heavy in urban design. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what kind of, why do you think that is within Columbia and within that program?
Well, first of all, I'm fascinated that you know about the Colombian program because it's different. Yeah, it's a 5-year program, and from day one you start studying architecture. So first year is basic design. So you are designing with, you start with talk about Bauhaus. Yeah, you start with the point, and then the line, and then the plane, and then colors, and then you start evolving from there. The last semesters of architecture are typically urban design studios. My thesis was a plan for taking a large district of downtown Bucaramanga and revitalizing it. The blocks in Colombia are 100 meters by 100 meters, so they're square. And back in the day, the center of the block was basically the backyards of the old houses. And as the city has grown and densified, then you have to figure out ways to get to the center of the block and so on. So that was kind of part of the process of that. I did something similar, and we can talk about that later, for my thesis at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which was the first time I did a joint, the very first time that was done at that university, a joint architecture and urban planning thesis, not just a graduate or a final project. So yes, architecture in Colombia is progressive. It's a 5-year program. And you end up doing urban design studios in the last year or in the last 2 years. I did actually, the last 2 years were very heavily in urban design.
Is that, I mean, Columbia seems pretty dense, at least the city centers, a lot of density. And is that because of the kind of extreme topography that forces people into smaller areas, or like... Is that true?
Okay. So we're in Denver, right?
Right.
So we don't have extreme topography here.
Right. We've got nice plains.
Pretty much the American West and the Midwest, we can just sprawl all over. But I think the difference is also in mobility. Not everybody in Colombia has a car, and that is a big difference. Or at least, I mean, that's changing like the rest of the world. And that's part of the problem for regenerativism, that we cannot have a the urban form is a lot linked to how we move around, where we work, where we play, and so on. So it has to do a lot with that. Bucaramanga, my hometown, is on a plateau, so the whole it's actually the geography is amazing because it's like a series of plateaus, and Bucaramanga is one of those, and so the whole plateau is now developed. Bogota, on the other hand, for instance, is on a high altitude lake bed, pretty much like Mexico City. Whereas other cities like Medellin, for instance, is in a valley and so on. So it's not just topography. It has to do a lot with how the economy is and so on. And it's a lot more efficient to develop densities. And that is actually one of the problems that we have here in Denver. I am a member of the Denver Planning Board, which is the planning and zoning commissions in other cities. And one of my responsibilities as the representative of architects in the planning board is to keep on pushing on the dialogue for higher densities. Now, Denver in itself is landlocked. We have kind of used most of the land, but we still have a lot of space to grow up. To grow in altitude. So there are several districts that I have been very supportive of to increase densities. There are others that I hope our blueprint, which is part of the comprehensive plan, changes to allow us for more density and so on.
Yeah. So you got that sort of one type of urbanism in Columbia, and then you went to Wisconsin, and were you able to kind of continue that same line of study there, or was it a totally different experience?
So I said I had a scholarship to go to Wisconsin. In reality, it wasn't quite a scholarship. I had to work for it. So my job was a teaching assistant for the urban design studio with the undergraduate students. So I had to really experience firsthand with the professors I was assisting how to understand the relationship of design and urban design to a curriculum. So I guess in a way that was my first cultural shock to understand suburbia. But the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee or UWM, is an urban university. It's within the city core. So it's not like many architecture schools that you see in the U.S. that are in small towns, rural settings, and so on. This is an urban place. So it had already ingrained in its culture some of that. And so I guess it's a good segue to my thesis, because my thesis was, can you redevelop an American city urban core in a way that you can increase density, have equity, and have more accessibility? So what I was looking at is Walker's Point neighborhood, pretty much like Elyria, Swansea here in Denver. A neighborhood that is mostly Latino, split by highway, and that had been pretty much red line throughout history and so on. So one of the premises was the hold on, my Siri is trying to get into the conversation. Turn off, Siri. Okay, so let me just go back to Walker's Point is like Elyria, Swansea, and the thesis was, can we redevelop a neighborhood close to the urban core that is mostly a minority that has been redlined, and so on. And one of the elements of the response was to allow for additional dwelling units. I wasn't calling them that time. Mind you, this is 1992, but we were saying the way to increase density is by allowing, these were homes built in the 1800s by Polish immigrants and so on that were pretty good homes, 3 stories and so on, that we could actually split into flats and have 3 units in that and so on. So it was trying to set up an approach to urban redevelopment, that's part of the regenerativism, by allowing more density in this and allowing the development of granny flats, or what we call today additional dwelling units. Mm-hmm. So it was very well received, had good marks, and the director of planning at the time I requested a copy of the thing and so on. The director that followed was Peter Park, who became later a director of planning here in Denver, and who was also my colleague. And we were colleagues also in the Planning and Design Institute, which was one of the jobs that I had with my professors at the University of Wisconsin.
So you do this thesis and this idea of regenerating maybe underserved or redlined areas, and you graduate and you move to Aspen. Is that right?
Yeah, that is true.
How did that happen? How did that decision? You heard a radio DJ and you just followed to
No. I hadn't turned the radio on at that time. A friend of mine followed. Actually, there's always love involved somewhere, right? A friend of mine, one of my students, and a person who later became an architect. He followed his girlfriend to Colorado because she was an interior designer. She got a job in Breckenridge. So my last winter vacation, they invited me to spend it with them. So I went there and I learned to ski, and I fell in love with the sport. So I got a job, Copper Mountain, putting people in boots. And I could take a lesson anytime. So I learned how to ski, how to snowboard, and how telemark ski. And so after I graduated, I came to Aspen. It was the middle of the recession, but 92. But I guess they were hiring in Aspen. So the first interview I had, they offered me the job. I took it, and I was there for 3 years. So what was my experience there? Yes, designing homes for the billionaires is not my cup of tea.
And that was CCY, right? That you worked for?
Correct. Well, back then it was called CGY. But they also did a lot of hospitality. And that's where my expertise was used. And back in those days, we were doing illustrations in watercolor and pen and ink and so on. So I was also doing a lot of their illustrations, although they had, I can't remember Mark's name. They had another illustrator, architect too, who was just an amazing illustrator. So he was doing some of those renderings as well. But while I was there, I realized something, that I wasn't getting fulfilled. That my background as architect and urban designer was not really being fulfilled with my practice with CGY, and so I started looking around for things, and I was able to be part of 2 initiatives that they are now defunct, but they lasted for a number of years. One was the Latino Networking Council, and what we were doing was basically organizing around the communities, the Latino communities in the Roaring Fork Valley, And so we had the people that work in Aspen in hospitality and so on. They live typically down valley all the way to Rifle, which is a commute of 40 miles or more. And actually more than that, because 40 miles is all the way to Glenwood Springs, so even further. So we tried to organize around that. One of the things that we did, and that my architecture experience was helpful, was looking for grants to retrofit the trailer homes in which they lived. So just imagine that in the 50s and the 60s, the ski bums were living in trailer homes. Now, in the 90s, 30 years later, people were using the same trailer homes without any kind of retrofitting. So the energy efficiency was really bad and so on. So we wrote a few grants to fund, and basically we got some foam, insulation foam machines, and we kind of helped super insulate some of these. We tried to do a lot of passive solar with the trailers as well, like trying to attach some kind of south-facing greenhouse to get some heat gains. Those ended up just in paper. But yeah, there was a lot of thinking around that. Yeah, and then the other one was more about sustainability in general, although back in those days, we were not using the term sustainability. But we were talking, this was the Healthy Mountain Communities Initiative, a project founded by the Denver Urban League. And so again, we're talking about issues of mobility and housing and so on. So that gave me a little bit of purpose. Plus hiking in the mountains was another reason what made me stay there, at least for those 3 years.
And then that feeling of unfulfillment just built up, and you had to have a change, had to move on. What was that like?
Yeah. I was very restless. For a long time, I didn't have a job for longer than 3 years. So I was always looking for a new challenge, I guess. So before I came to Aspen, I had interviewed with Skidmore, Owens and Merrill. And when it came to time, I called them back and said, "What happened?" They said, "Well, you still have an offer here if you want to come here." So my girlfriend and I moved to Chicago. We got married in Chicago. Our baby was born in Chicago 25 years ago. And so I took a job with Skidmore. And we had, this was a global urban design practice. So I was in their urban design group. So that was an experience of, again, 3 years. I guess some of the really good projects that we did was, well, these were really interesting projects. A lot of learning lessons from there. Most of our clients were, at least our Chinese clients were kind of, I don't know if you can call a Chinese official an oligarch, because it's a communist country. So I don't know how we call those, but these were actually people high up on the Communist Party who were also developers. So we did a really good project that I lost a battle, and this is one of my biggest lessons from that experience. I lost a battle to try to. So we had a large parcel. I can think of something like about 20 to 30 acres in the third ring road of Beijing, and was to create an international center. So basically something for expatriates, people from the US and the UK and or countries who were doing business in here. So it was kind of to develop a modern urban center, if you want, on this third ring road and so on the lands of an existing udon or hudong, which is a traditional Chinese street and so on. So my battle there was to preserve the hudong, to basically allow for the new development to integrate to the existing historic pattern. I think that was pretty much, well, maybe, I don't know if that was the beginnings of the regenerativism, but it had to do with it because, I mean, we were erasing history. And we had actually ended up doing that. But it was interesting. The other we worked in two other projects. I worked as the principal designer on the grounds for the Jin Mao Tower, which was at the time one of the candidates to be the tallest building in the world. And so did some of the ground design approach to the building and so on. But the other one was a project for Macau, and again, Macau back in the mid '90s was getting ready to go back to China. Macau had been a colony of the Portuguese, and then the deal was that in '98 it would revert back to China. So the developers in there wanted to maximize their entitlements for casinos and hotels and so on. Macau is the Las Vegas of Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that we did. We made a major mistake, which was in our design. We unintentionally crossed the international boundary with a pier, and that derailed that project. There are some remnants of that. You can see in Google Earth that some of the components that we were talking about were used for redeveloping Macau, or at least this part of Macau. We had many other projects and so on, but yeah, that was the Skidmore experience. Great people, a lot of work. Back in those days, there were weeks we worked about 100 hours.
That wears on you.
Well, yeah, and the family's patience too.
Yeah, with little kids. What did that start to fulfill you a little bit more? Working more with master planning, or was that those oligarchs or whoever? It's not the same as your thesis.
Good segue for my next job. My next job was with the Center for Neighborhood Technology in Chicago, and that was also another 3-year experience. This is a nonprofit, and CNT has been a leader on many things. They were the first people who were talking about car share, the shared mobility applications that we see now in many places. They were created back in the, I think it was 70s, energy crisis, and looking at adaptable and neighborhood appropriate technologies. My job there had nothing to do with architecture, had to do a lot with urban design, but more so with community organizing. So we had my title was, and this is the first time that the word sustainability gets used there. I was a Sustainable Calumet Project Manager. 1997, maybe. 96, 97. My child was born in 96, so it was around that time when he was a baby. And this was a really fulfilling. Did a lot of things, all regarding air quality, water quality, biodiversity conservation, transportation, I got to do one of the first transit-oriented development symposia. So what I did was I captured the Congress for the New Urbanism was going to meet in Milwaukee that year. So I captured some of the keynote speakers and brought them to Chicago for this. So Barnett and some others were involved in this, and so we did a lot of workshops regarding transit-oriented development in the most challenged areas of Southeast Chicago. The Calumet region, actually, the Calumet River is one of the smaller watersheds in the continental U.S. because it drains onto Lake Michigan. Historically, it used to drain. The Lake Michigan used to drain into the Mississippi Basin, and since then, this has become a flight path for all the migratory birds. So it's an area of great interest for biodiversity conservation because of its wetlands and so on. But also because of the wetlands, it became an ideal place to put all the steel mills in the 19th century, 18th century, late 18th, early 19th century, because back then we thought that wetlands were wastelands, right? So this is a very heavily industrialized area. A lot of it's the most dense Superfund sites, which is basically the most polluted sites in the U.S. according to the EPA. A lot of cleanup that needs to be done. So my job, in reality, was as a community organizer. And when we were prepping for this, you asked what was my most significant project. There are many, but from this experience, I think that our best claim of fame was that we stopped the Napalm Express. The Napalm Express was because Indiana, so the Calumet straddles both Illinois and Northwest Indiana. Indiana at the time, and I think they are still not the best, had really poor environmental laws. So in Indiana, you could legally burn napalm without scrubbers and without any kind of environmental controls. And as you know, napalm is basically styrofoam and gasoline, and there's a lot of dioxins that come out of this, especially if you burn it, and so on. So again, this was a coalition of many people. I was just one part of it in the organizing side, but we created a coalition that stopped the Napalm Express, which was going to come from San Diego to Northwest Indiana to this facility to get burnt. So that was a good victory.
Crazy. And then what ended that? So was that another 3 years there? Three?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so what that ended was this employment was under a grant from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. So it expired, and I had to make the decision to become a grant writer or to go back to become a designer. And I decided to become a designer. One of my professors said, they are building a light rail system, or they are doing the EIS for a light rail system in Tampa, Florida. So I ended up in Tampa, helping write this EIS for a light rail that hasn't happened yet. So this was happening at the same time as fast tracks. We're now in the early 2000s. Cities are applying for federal funding for their mobility solutions, and Tampa was competing for the same amount of money. It had to go to a referendum. That it passed here in Denver in 2004. In Tampa, it did not pass. People did not support it, which it was it was a misfortune in a way for Tampa, because it could have really helped. Especially Tampa had a better option of serving more population than Denver had at the time. Yeah, so it would have been, I think, in the eyes of the FDA, would have been a much better proposal. But it did not pass. So that was not a 3-year experience, but a 2-year experience with the company who was doing the EIS. And I moved to another company in Tampa, based in Omaha, that was doing urban design nationwide. Yeah. So I continued being an urban designer from that point of view, and did a lot of really good work, proposals for streetcars, some of those which happened. So our focus was mostly on streetcars, but we did a lot of form-based code, a lot of corridor planning, stationary planning, and we did also some architecture. Actually, I did some architecture with the previous company. I was, again, you cannot claim all the fame from one project, because even if you're Calatrava, you cannot claim it all. You have to rely on people, right? So we did the maintenance facility for the streetcar in Tampa. So we were not able to do the light rail, but we did a streetcar. And the streetcar maintenance facility was in Ybor City. Ybor City is a district of Tampa, which is known to be the cigar factory center of the Caribbean in those days. Well, this part of the Atlantic, for many years, especially in the 19th century. So we kind of did something context appropriate. And so on. It's a beautiful facility. I'm proud of it, actually. But with the next company I went to, we were doing a lot of streetcar as well, and so on.
That was HDR, or
yes, yeah. That is correct.
And then you decided to move to the city that did get the light rail. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
What was that choice to come back to Colorado?
Well, it was a lifestyle choice. My wife, when I met my wife, she had just moved to Colorado, and then I kind of dragged her back to the Midwest. She had grown up in near Chicago, so I brought her back to the Midwest, and then to Tampa. And she's like, "Okay, we need to go back to Colorado." And our son was about to enter middle school, so it was a really good time to make him move. We didn't want to move him at any other time. So we came back to Colorado, this time to Denver. I had passed an opportunity before going to Chicago, of coming to Denver. And I think that was a good decision. In the time, so let's say from 2000 to, from 96 to, so in about 10 years, Denver really grew into a much more solid city. So I came here. I did not get work on the Fast Tracks project right away. I actually came to work for Us Architecture. I was going to say SOM, for Us Architecture, and I had a really good experience there. The urban design practice was headed by Carl Worthington, now retired, but a landscape architect who had a really good flair for urban design. So I call it my 3 years of schooling in Boulder, because this was in their Boulder office. And we did many good projects. The highlight of all those was the number of projects that we did for the Rwandan government, including a master plan for the city of Kigali for a new city center. with partners from IDA at the time, a landscape architecture firm that is now part of a major corporation, and two fellows who were in that company that have now passed away, Andrew Irvine, who just passed very recently, and Ross Butler. But really great designers, really dynamic project. We made a lot of really good contributions to the city of Kigali. And so we were able actually to get an award from the APA, the Daniel Burnham Award, for our work on those master planning. And we did not only for the city of Kigali, for the city of Ramagana, and some more planning work there. So that was great.
Were you able to kind of integrate some of those other ideas of regeneration and plugging in with the history of the place in those projects?
Oh, yeah. I guess actually, there were some flashy projects there, hospitals and so on. We were proposing the government center, but you have to understand something about Rwanda. Rwanda had just survived, not survived, but it had just gone through a really horrible genocide, in which two ethnic groups basically chopped themselves to death. But the remarkable thing about what Rwanda did was something called the Kachasas, which is the reconciliation effort that the communities had to just recognize the atrocities that had been committed, and had community tribunals that allowed people to reintegrate into society and allow them to express their remorse and really to reintegrate into a multi-ethnic community. So one of the projects, and this is the one that I'm most proud of, is not the flashiest one, but what I proposed, and it is, I don't know how far it has gone because I haven't kept track of the progress, but there were some informal settlements that were part of the project area. Some of the land was mostly kind of rural, dispersed housing and so on. But there were some areas that were informal settlements, refugees getting close to the urban centers and so on. And no water, no services and so on. And the proposal that we did, and I was pushing really hard for this, was to formalize them. With the help that at the time in Rwanda, there was not much private property. So if you allowed people to remain in the lands that they were occupying and give them community ownership, you would actually help them. You make something better when you own it, right? And so we took this informal settlement, and it was just a model. Could have been replicated in many other informal settlements, not only in Rwanda but anywhere in Brazil, in Colombia, anywhere you have what in Colombia call invasion neighborhoods, and allow them to formalize. So you just say, hey, this is your abode. And then you're allowed to stay there, and you're allowed to, instead of having cardboard walls, you can, have them from more durable materials and so on. The streets would get formalized, and then so you start having pretty much like European cities developed over the centuries, right? There was somebody built a house here, and there was a cow path there, and there was somebody built another house there, and all of a sudden you have like this beautiful organic city, and so on. So it was pretty much the same idea, bringing services. So they had a number of social programs that I was proposing. Like, for instance, in order to bring water to the neighborhood, you didn't have to bring water to every single house. You can just bring it to a place, like it would happen back as in the European example, in which the water was the water fountain in the village plaza or whatever, and then around that you could develop some services like daycare, so the grandpas and the grandmas can take care of the children while the parents are going to work, and so on. So it had some value in that. I think that was, to me, was the most significant contribution to the thought of how can you improve informal settlements in a city like Kigali.
Yeah. So, okay. So you've worked at CCY, at SOM, at HDR, at Oz, 33352, whatever, and then you've been integrating architecture and master planning, and then you end at RTD. So what was that like, and that's been what, you've been there 10 years?
10 years, yeah.
And so that's by far kind of the longest you've stayed somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And so
actually,
it seems like you're fulfilled in that. So how did all these things come together and drop you off at this point that you're at here?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. There was a period actually between us and RTD. So most of us lost our jobs during the 2008 recession. And so I started my own business called Urban Designer, which you can still find at urbandesigner.com. Now that website is going to become a blog for a research trip that I am about to start on September 19th on Troglodyte Architecture, and we can talk about that. But so I started my own company, and I was doing everything I could, really. I was helping a California-based company do master planning in China. So I went back to China I didn't go back to China. I was doing the work from Denver, but I mean, literally, figuratively, I went back to China to do master planning for major developments, mostly north of Beijing. So that was one thing. The other thing I did was I learned solar photovoltaic systems, and did the course for the certification with NAPSA, which is the national organization that certified solar design and installations. I tried to create my own company, which I would not be able to do because I cannot compete with the Namastes and all the other companies who have a better relationship in the market. So I ended up then teaching solar design in a technical school. And I was doing updates to the comprehensive plans in Aspen and in Garfield County. So I was doing all kinds of things. And it's a recession is not the best time to start your own company. I could not make the company grow. And I said, well, I need to go back and look for work. There were 2 jobs available, or I had 2 offers for a suburban municipality and with RTD. And I said, well, I'll do my typical 3 years with RTD, because this was after almost 3 years of having Urban Designer, right? So I'll do 3 years with RTD and then I'll move on. What I have found that I really like of working for RTD is my clients, because my client is the community. And that really fulfills me. We're talking about Santiago Calatrava, and he said to RTD at some point when he was proposing the bridge over Peña Boulevard, that budgets are for small minds. And I'm like, well, there's something wrong here. Budgets are actually part of the reality, and we need to, we have a responsibility with the resources that we have. So we digress in that. I think his structural design is really good and very creative, very organic in a way. But in that sense, he completely failed the mark. So I think the responsibility of serving a community is key. And it has its challenges. Right now, we're installing the 15L, which is the service on East Colfax from downtown Denver Civic Center all the way to Tower Road, basically, depending on the service, which is kind of the L stands for limited, which is kind of an express services. So we are putting new urban furniture, if you want, with real-time data and so on. And so the process to get to the design, doing the community participation, because one of the key things of working for a transit agency is that you are, as the designer, and this is the difference between Calatrava and Ignacio. He can do projects without budgets. That's one thing. And he does projects out of his imagination. My designs are based on the interpretation of my client's aspirations. Yeah. So I'm an interpreter. I paint, I can do my creative stuff in that sense. But when I am designing, I am interpreting what the user is going to need. And I think that is the key difference between architecture and real urban design, because the real urban design is not portraying the greatness of a creative mind, but is really portraying, or is really interpreting what a community needs to be regenerative in a way. What can you do in order to allow for a community to be better, and so on. So I think that through design, we will see how these improvements are going to be affecting our users. And we have to, brace ourselves, because they are going to get tagged, as I was doing when I was a teenager.
Yeah, payback. Yeah,
exactly. So that is kind of the situation there. And that I don't mind as much as the vandalism, because there is a big sentiment in our community of inequity. And so a public investment, many people don't see as something to their benefit, right? But I think that goes into a different conversation. We're going to have in the next couple of weeks, September 15, with the American Institute of Architects, Colorado, a chat about equity and about diversity in architecture and in urban design and in planning, with Don Elliott and myself as the panelists, and it's part of the town hall meetings that the AIA Colorado does. So that should be a very good conversation. The reason why I say this is because I was starting to get into a little bit of the equity issues, and I don't know if we want to talk much about this, but that is a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it seems like it's been a real thread throughout your career and your passions. And I mean, obviously RTD has a lot of opportunities in how it can start to address that within the city. But then, yeah, you've you do so many other things like AIA Colorado, AIA Denver, right? You were the director for a while, or the president, and with the Planning Association and everything as well. How? Maybe let's see if I can make a good question out of that. But what are the opportunities that you get the most excited about with RTD's future, and how it can start addressing some of those issues of inequity, or can it, or does it?
Yeah. Well, so you have to realize that RTD's mission is to provide safe, clean, reliable, courteous, accessible, and cost-effective mobility throughout the region. So it's about moving people, right? So, an architect plays a small part in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what excites me about this is, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but Phil Washington was the CEO and general manager of RTD a few years ago. Now he's in a similar capacity at the Denver International Airport, or DEN now. And one of the things that he said while he was in as the CEO of LA Metro was that he was trying to get LA to become fare free by the time the Olympics are planned to come to LA. So it is not just about RTD, but it's about the place where I live, which is the RTD region, and transit and mobility. And I think that the key equity piece should be public transit should be free or close to free. There's only one country in the world that does that, and it's a very small country. It's Luxembourg. Yeah. So Luxembourg is able to do that, and it has great benefits. Their carbon footprint per capita is a lot smaller than most nations, and so on. And so the issue is then not only about mobility, but the effect that mobility has on air quality and lifestyle and so on. Now we're seeing with the pandemic how people retreated back home and started commuting more from work, like we're doing. A few years ago, probably would have done this in a studio, but now we can do it from our own homes. So that is good because you didn't have to drive to the studio. I didn't have to drive there or take a bus or whatever. And then our carbon footprints in that sense get reduced. So I think that is key. And then the other thing is just provide that type of architecture that is selfless, that is community oriented, and so on. So I'm excited about what I do. My role has changed throughout the pandemic. I am now, for the first time in many years, I am just an architect. When I came to RTD, my title was senior architect and urban designer. With the pandemic, we laid off about 500 people.
Wow.
And I am the only architect that remains in the organization. So it is a great responsibility, and it's also a challenge for somebody who has been thinking in global terms down to, sometimes to specify materials for a remodel and so on. Yeah.
Interesting. So you brought this up a little bit, and your name came to me again recently because of the Fuller traveling scholarship. So you're studying the Troglodyte Architecture. Let's hear more about that.
Yeah. So most people in the U.S. don't know what the word troglodyte means. It's not the same in Colombia. In Colombia, it's used as an insult. Yeah. When you call somebody a troglodyte, basically you're telling that person you're a caveman. Pretty much how we use the term Neanderthal here in the U.S. Like you're a Neanderthal or so on. So troglodyte comes from the Greek as troglos and ditos is basically to go into a hole. Yeah. And so a troglodyte dwelling is a cave. So the title of my research is Learning from Troglodyte Architecture. And this is where we go into the real nitty gritty of the regenerativism, because the troglodyte dwellings that I am studying are still inhabited. One of them probably continuously for the last 30,000 years. So from the Upper Neolithic, we have people living in the same place. There has to be something that is right about this place. Others are a lot newer. Actually, what got my idea going was during the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a movie, Pain and Glory, by Pedro Almodovar, with Antonio Banderas as playing Pedro Almodovar. And one of the early scenes, or one of the scenes in which the main character was a child, was in a cave dwelling. And that kind of made me remember my family's geographic atlas. There were 3 big tomes with pictures and descriptions of countries and places and so on. And the ones that stuck the most in my memory were Cappadocia and Guadix in Spain, which are troglodyte villages. Actually, Goreme, the one in Cappadocia, Turkey. And so I was, that kind of revived that interest. So I said, hey, well, what about this? And so on. So the Robert Fuller and his wife's foundation gave me the ability to really look into this. So what am I looking for? What are the lessons that I'm trying to look for? And as I am discovering, it is that slow tech is the best alternative to high tech. And but we're in such a hurried moment, in history, in the human history, that we want to innovate every minute. Whereas you look at these villages, hold on, they adapted over thousands of years because they were feeling the earth, they were feeling the land, they were adapting to it. There was obviously an ability to allow people to live in these holes in the ground, and some of those have evolved a lot better. For instance, in Goreme, we have places that were caves several hundred years ago, but now you have built fronts to that, and so these are beautiful buildings with a cave integrated to it. The same in Guadix, and in AIA, spelled OIA, AIA, Greece, which is one of the villages in the island of Santorini, or it's actually a couple islands, which is basically a really remarkable story, because about 3,000 years ago, it's 3,000 BC, maybe. It's in the pre-Hellenic times. There was a volcanic eruption in this island. The island is basically on the caldera of a volcano, and it took the city of Akrotiri, which was the pre-Hellenic settlement there, and just obliterated it. But people came back a few hundred years after, and the tuff and the volcanic rock were easy to carve in, so they made their dwellings in these caves and so on. So has now become, because of the magnificent landscape of the area, has become one of the tourist destinations of the world. So if you hear the word Santorini and oh yeah, that's a place where rich people go vacationing, but there is more than that. So we're going to be exploring that and so on. So I'll be talking to the Denver and Colorado architects about this after I return and have some good images and stories to share.
Yeah, fantastic. I look forward to seeing that and seeing the sort of results of it. Well, I've heard you speak once, and I ran into you at CU one time as we were both leaving the building, and I think I went like 1 or 2 blocks out of my way just to keep walking with you because the conversation that we had just in those 2 blocks was so engaging. So I wanted to have you on the show and just have another talk, and it's been really fun. So thanks for coming, and thanks for your leadership in the city and all the kind of explorations you're doing around, especially for equity. So thanks for.
Well, I really
talking.
appreciate that, Adam. It's been a pleasure. I love the idea of this Riverside.fm. I think is great. I hope that this actually gets some people thinking about their own paths. I really ask architects to be engaged and involved and try to make a difference, not just by designing a building, but being part of the community and just being in tune with their own aspirations. How do you want to change the world? What is the part of the world that you want to change? So for me, is the regenerativism. For you and for others would be something else. So just do it. We can only make a better world if we want to.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to this week's show.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.
Yeah. Well, I almost lost hope this week. I was sitting where I am right now, and somebody broke in the house and was 13 feet away from where I am. Wow. Took my wife's purse. I was kind of like this. I didn't notice that person, and so on. And so that burglary made me doubt for more than a minute, about humanity.
Wow.
and the project on Colfax, where we have already seen people throwing paint and tagging and so on. I mean, nobody is doing really good graffiti. That's my problem with it,
Yeah.
But so that was a challenge. But it goes to the where I was going with this is to the conversation that we're going to have with Don, which is the one about equity. We are seeing more and more people on the streets, people living on the streets. Yeah, and probably the burglar that got here is not a street dweller, or as the city of Denver calls them, an unhoused person. But there are people more desperate and so on. And that is part because of the way our economic structure is set. First of all, we are not taxing ourselves enough to have the social responsibility that we need to have. Right? Yeah. So, and we vilify the idea of social housing. Actually, we call it here, what is it, subsidized housing or whatever. And I think that, like you do hospitals and prisons and everything else that makes your society work, housing should be one of those elements. And we're not doing any of those right, by the way. Our prison system is not well set up and so on. But we are not. If you look at Northern European countries like Norway and Sweden and Denmark, you see that they tax themselves enough to allow to provide for the people who need it. That is the cost of society. Otherwise, you live in fear that you will get home invaded, and so on. I mean, there's no direct correlation between that and what happened this week, but what drives somebody to live on the street or to be a thief of opportunity has to do in part of what opportunities you had as you were growing up. Where were you at that point, and so on. So we're doing the small things. So my contribution as a planning board member is minimal. We keep on pushing for higher densities and for more inclusionary policies and so on. You will hear Don Elliott say, zoning is actually the purpose of zoning is to exclude, not to include. Zoning is regulation that tells you cannot do this here, right? That's what zoning is, and it is based a lot on here in the U.S. Based a lot on redlining. So we're talking a lot about additional dwelling units lately, and one of my pushes in the planning board is like to city council is you guys have to do legislative additional dwelling units throughout the city, because the planning board is doing it on a piecemeal basis. Only one council district has passed two smaller districts for ADUs. So obviously the other side of the equation is like, hey, you are attacking the bedrock of American living, which is the single family home. And they're like, well, we're not there anymore. We are at a different point. It has to do a lot with what I was talking about, mobility and so on. Is we cannot be a regenerative city. Denver cannot be a regenerative city today with the way we're set up. Single family homes are, I mean, you can still have your single family home, but come on, you can allow somebody to live on an apartment on top of your garage, that kind of thing. But the other question is like, okay, who can afford that? If you were the homeowner, it's going to cost you at least $100,000, if not more, and the payback is going to be very slow.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm in the process of sort of planning one for my backyard and thinking through it, and just the sort of paybacks there and the possibilities, and I sort of similar to you. I was kind of 2 years at different places, and one of those was in the Netherlands. And so, really living in that dense urban environment and just loving it, just of the public transit and the townhomes that we were kind of in, and like you're saying, those sort of inner block environments, where you kind of have everybody's backyard backing up to each other and creating that life. And so, yeah, I'm here on, in kind of Sunnyside, where we have on a 25-foot lot, and nice and tight with people, and enjoying that. But, obviously values of homes are just exploding, and people are putting in ADUs, but it's just getting tighter and tighter. And I think in a good way, but challenging people's expectations.
So then the other question is, well, where is the subsidy going to come from for that? Yeah. And there's very little. And this is where Denver probably is not getting it right, because we're saying to developers, okay, you get an incentive for more construction area if you do whatever 80% AMI and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
well, that is just not the right approach. We favor developers, the big developers, a lot. Whereas we only have like 3 or 4 major, and they are not major in reality, but 3 or 4 established nonprofit organizations that work on this, the Urban Land Conservancy and a few others. Yeah, there's not that many. And you should be able to say, hey, what if we do a nonprofit here and we help develop whatever 5 ADUs per semester in the neighborhoods where we need them, and so on. And then how would you finance that? And that's what I was talking about. We don't get ourselves taxed enough, because we should be taxing ourselves to allow for that, and to allow for free public transportation and so on.
Yeah, it's a uphill battle, huh?
Yeah,
but necessary.
The year I was, or the 2 years that I was, one of the 2 years that I was director of the AIA Colorado in Denver, was the pandemic year. So really, it was, and it was the first year of the pandemic. So it was a real challenge to get things going. But I guess my job there was kind of, in a way, not to become an interpreter, but to be a representative of everybody and bring things forward. So some of the policy issues that came back were not as hot during the pandemic year. But one of the things that I think that the AIA can be really helpful, especially the legislative committee, is to help shape the dialogue about ADUs, not only in Denver, but in the Denver metro region and throughout the state. Like, let's talk about density, because it's a dirty word and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. It's been great talking. Right. Yeah. Have a good day.
Adam.
Yeah. See ya.
You take care.
Bye.
Goodbye.